Another day, another frame. Today we're taking a look at the URUAV NEX220. Now, this looks a lot like the real ACC packaging where they just kind of put real ACC on here and then stuck the thing on, the little sticker with the name on it. So I'm kind of wondering if we're going to see any more real ACC or if URUAV has kind of replaced it. Anyway, this is an ultralight frame. We're going to open it up and take a look at it. It is coming up on whoop season, so I got another whoop video coming up soon. This is the US 65, or you could buy the UK 65. Also got my hoodie ready so I can fly outside and not get cold. So here are all the parts laid out. It comes with this main plate here. This is the bottom plate, I guess, and it actually has giant holes in the bottom of it. This looks like it's about 3 millimeters thick. And then instead of having a middle plate, it actually has these two pieces that go into the middle, and that allows the flight board to sit in between them. We'll take a little closer look at that because it did come with a Modtech power distribution board, and this has the 12 volt and the 5 volt outputs on it, which is nice if your board doesn't support full 6S or 4S batteries. Also, it comes with a URUAV battery strap. It comes with a 3D printed piece to hold your antenna out the back between the spacers. And also, these arms are kind of interesting. They're pretty thick arms, but they only have 2 screw holes on them. Now, that's not a bad thing. A lot of my old time quads used to only have 2 screws in them, but you absolutely have to use Loctite. If you're not using Loctite, the screws will vibrate loose and you'll lose the motor and you'll be flopping over all over the ground trying to recover. Anyway, just use Loctite. It also came with a file. This is also something else that kind of makes me think that this is a real ACC brand, or I guess company that is going to be, you know, called URUAV now. Also comes with a battery protector here and then some little foam feet. I usually use these for batteries to help hold them on. So anyway, let's get this thing put together. One thing to note about these arms is that they look like they're the same, and you know, they're pretty much exactly cut the same, except for the holes are a little different. This one has a hole down here and up there, and these two are up here close together. It doesn't have a hole down there. And the reason for that is because on this main plate up here in the front, the 2 holes are closer together for the spacing between the camera, and then back here in the back they're a little closer together. So, you know, it's kind of disappointing because that means you can't just take an extra arm. You have to be careful about the arm you take. One thing they could have done is they could have drilled an extra hole in this arm in the middle, an extra hole in this arm out on the end, and that would have made the arms interchangeable and didn't matter which one you put where, but it might have been a little confusing for people to put together having all the holes in the arms, especially when they're not being used. So here's the NEX220 mostly finished. And like I was saying before, it has the main bottom plate here, which runs the entire length of the body, has the arms come in, and has this little piece on the back and a separate little one up here on the front. What happens is the screws, like on this side here, go in through the bottom up into this middle piece, and it has little purple spacers that screw onto there to hold them into place. Now these screws are kind of long, and after you put the power distribution board in here, you still have a lot of thread left. And so if you take the included spacers and put these on here, you still have a little bit of space inside there, a little gap, and so it doesn't actually tighten down tight on the board. So you'd have to have some kind of other little spacer to go inside there. Maybe you could use the extra little nylon nuts that came with it to go underneath the flight board, but all you're doing is raising that board up a little bit more than it actually needs to be. Well, at first I thought, well, maybe these aren't the right screws. Maybe they're supposed to be some different ones. Well, all the screws are the same except for these 4, and also these 2 here are a little bit shorter, and these 2 back here are a little bit shorter yet. So these are kind of the only screws that you have. So I don't know. I guess it's okay. You put the nylon nut in there, and you have to come up with another set of nylon nuts to go up on top to hold your flyboard on, but you know, that's not too big of a deal. The cool thing is though, is that you have all this room down underneath here, either for wiring to go up to your little power distribution board if you run it upside down, or if you're battery strapped to get through. And so, like I said, plenty of room. And it does have the 20 by 20 holes here if you wanted to actually run a 20 by 20 down inside of there, which would be really tight. But then you would also, along doing that, you'd lose your battery strap unless you, your battery strap hole, unless you raised it up a little bit to make a little bit more room. Up here on the front though, it has these carbon fiber pieces, and they're in here real snug. It has 3 holes in there so you can decide where to put your run cam micro. Up here on the top, it has this extra piece of carbon fiber that just lays up over top of this and just kind of sandwiches down on there, and I'm sure that's on there just to give a little bit more strength up here to this top plate, especially since this is what's going to take most of the impact in crashes, and doubling up that carbon fiber there is really going to make it a lot stronger. Now it is kind of thin, like I was saying, so you get a lot of board hanging out both sides, and that was one kind of problem they had with the original floss frame, is that so much board is hanging out, people were tending to get that hit. So it's just something to be leery of, I guess, or aware of. Back here it has the antenna holder, and it just goes up around these two pillars up now the top. If you slide this down and it gets down around this middle section, it just flops around because these things are not wide enough. So whenever they include these 3D pieces like this, I wish they would go ahead and make the pillar or the spacer here all the same width instead of trying to get these little cooler ones. Because you need to be the same all the way down in case you want to run your antenna upside down or have it come down instead of up like that. So I don't know. So here's the NEX220 fully assembled. It does have the power distribution board in here, along with the all 4 screws, the spacers, and the little nylon spacer and nuts that go up here. So if we weigh this, it comes in around 90.2 grams. That means that this is not going to be an ultralight frame. This is going to be more of a normal or average frame, just because the weight, usually an ultralight frame kind of goes up to about 70 grams. Anything above 70 kind of falls back into the normal. Normal kind of goes up to around 110 or so. Then you kind of get up into more freestyle-ish frames. So if I go ahead and throw this battery strap on too, it's going to add on another, I don't know, 3 or 4-ish grams. Looking at the shape of this frame, it looks like it's going to be a little bit wider than it is long. So it's kind of a stretched X to the side, or I guess people would call this an H frame maybe. All right, let's get some measurements on this. From side to side, it comes in about 166 millimeters. From front to back, it comes in about 143 millimeters. From corner to corner, it comes in almost spot on 220. The arms are 5 millimeters thick, about 9 millimeters wide. The bottom plate comes in about 3 millimeters. The spacers inside the frame are about 30 millimeters. From the front spacer to the rear spacer, you got about 50 millimeters of space inside there. The spacing up here in the front for the camera is about 19 millimeters. The included strap is almost 220 millimeters, more like about a 195. So this is not going to be okay for some of the bigger 4S batteries, and definitely not long enough for 6S. This frame should have no problem spinning 5-inch props. They clear the frame with plenty of space. Now you think, well, maybe I could do 5.5 or 6-inch props. Well, the problem you're going to run into is that from front to back, if I put another frame up, another prop up here, the spacing gets a little tight between the two props here. So even at 5.5 inch, it's going to be a little tight just because there's only about a quarter inch of space in there. See, you might be able to run 5.5, but I wouldn't guarantee it. With the NEX220 sitting here next to the HGLRC frame, you can definitely tell how this one's stretched wide and this one's stretched long. Now some people will say, well, which one's better? Well, my opinion is the stretched X is better for racing, where the wide is better for freestyle. Although I did have a wide frame that I used for a long time, and it flew real well for me. So, I don't know. I think it's just each person has their own individual feel for the frames. This is the URUAV NEX220 frame. This is a pretty nice frame. I like the 5mm wide arms, or thick arms, I guess, and the 9mm wide. The 2 holes for the motors, this should be fine as long as you're using the Loctite. Shouldn't have anything come off. I like the top plate, or this middle plate here, coming only just enough to hold the flyboard, which gives more room inside here for your strap to run through. And I like the 3D printed piece up here. I think this is good for your antenna mount, and I do think it's good that they actually included it. Sometimes you have to figure out some way to mount your own on there, or use the little straps up here, or zip ties with the holes or whatever. And also I like this double plate idea up here. This piece of carbon fiber is actually pretty small, so it's not going to add a lot of weight, but it is going to give a lot of strength to this front piece for impacts that it's going to take when you fly it. Now some of the things I'm not really a big fan of, I don't like these spacers having a little skinny part in the middle. But that's kind of a personal preference. I'm not a big fan of the carbon fiber mounts up here in the front. I'd like to have the 3D printed ones that grab onto the arms. That way they can help reduce a little bit of vibration. But these do provide, these are a lot more stiff. The camera's also not going to slide up and down on the 3D printed spacers there. Also, I'm not a real big fan of this skinny piece up here. I just think that this allows too much board to be impacted in a crash. So the Floss 1 kind of had the same problems, which is why the Floss 2 frame had a lot wider one. So, overall though, this isn't a bad frame. I do like the bottom piece here being 3mm thick, which should give tons of strength between the front and the rear arms. One other thing, and I mentioned this in my other video, is that I don't necessarily care for the flight board being centered completely right here in the middle of the frame. This one here looks like it's actually shifted a little bit to the back, which is good. It gives a little bit more room up here in the front for your camera to tilt. It also gives a little bit more, or by getting it back here, it gets it closer to having the battery cables coming in here so that they don't have to travel quite as far inside the frame. You can zip tie them to one of the side spacers there if you wanted to get a little bit more strength. But overall, I like this frame. It's not too bad. The URUAV NEX220 frame. This came from Banggood. If you have any questions about this, leave them down in the comments. I will try to help you out as best I can. And as always, thanks for watching.